Parade of Grafters.
Jackson, no!
Ding, ding.
Tell you what, I'm gonna try putting this down here, see what happens.
Yeah.
I reckon that might be a little bit better. Yeah, that looks better.
That's what happens when you get a producer in your fucking...
Yeah, no, I know. Okay.
I reckon just get into it.
Let's do it.
So...
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
It's very nice to see you.
We're getting a sweat on here.
I know, we don't have aircon on the bus today because they haven't got enough, there's the wrong type of power or something, I don't know. But so I'm sorry that it's warm in here. And it's not just my magnetic presence that's making you sweat, for the record.
It's all good. As much as across your career you have managed to scrape out quite a few pretty decent achievements now, I think, what is it, 10 albums?
10 albums, I mean that in and of itself is something that I feel sort of duty bound to justify a little bit, do you know what I mean? I mean, that's a lot of records.
It is,
you know?
But I would say that for my money you kind of peaked a little early with the knee-jerk stuff.
I knew you were going to say that.
I know, and it's my interview, so like we're just basically going to spend the next hour talking about knee-jerk.
I'm more than fine talking about knee-jerk.
Sick.
That works for me.
I was really curious on, because you've talked sparingly in the past about these early years for yourself, ducking away out of Eton at night and across the weekends to get to London for gigs.
Hanging out with you.
Hanging out with me.
Yeah.
Running across the country, finding the knee-jerk lads at Eton.
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about, like, literally the meeting of,
sure.
But also, like, getting into London and how you found your people, because you really did land. Well, I obviously got to know you when the knee-jerk thing was already flowing.
Yeah.
I knew Chris first, and you were obviously in the set. There was a definite set, like the sort of the Skipworth crew, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely.
How you kind of gravitated with those people, whether it was people that Ben knew already, or...
Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying, by the way, that like I've never really talked about this in an interview before, and I'm really stoked to talk about it.
Sick.
So, I knew Ben from the school I was at before, and we had kind of jammed in practice rooms and stuff. We met when we were about 10 years old, something like that. And like when I say jammed, I mean like, you know, Smells Like Teen Spirit badly.
Okay.
And that sort of business. And then, you know, I got sent off to Eton College. It's worth saying that, like, I really, really didn't want to be there. You know, I got hospitalised on my first night with a suicide attempt. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it was really not for me, but it was for my parents. So there we were. And I was there on a scholarship and all this. So it wasn't my preferred place to be in life. And I felt very angry and alienated and all that kind of thing. So I'd started playing music. I got into metal and stuff, and then into Nirvana because it's the 90s. And then Kurt Cobain talked about punk quite a lot, so I got into that. You know, I remember asking my mate Chris, different Chris, his uncle knew about music. So
Chris of Let's Play.
Eating for Swimming. Exactly.
Eating Before
his
Swimming,
uncle knew about music, and I said, you know, what's punk? And he was just like, oh my god, and told us to get Sex Pistols in the class, which we did, and then I was super into that, and then Green Day and the Offspring happened, so I was at Eton, and me and Ben, and then this guy called Chris, who we knew, who is Chris Lucas, was also a scholarship kid there, and he was into that kind of stuff as well, and the three of us, and then this Chinese guy who was at the school called Chang Tu was his name. He played bass, and he was like super into the Ramones and stuff. So the four of us formed a band at school, and like it's worth saying that like we were the least popular kids. Like everybody hated us, and like literally we formed a band because we were the only four people at our school who knew who the Ramones were. Do you know what I mean? So and we were into kind of like all the 90s skate punk stuff, Millencolin, Pennywise, all that sort of business.
I didn't realise Chris was also a scholarship kid.
Yeah. He's a very smart man. And
God, yeah.
So the four of us started kind of jamming together at school, and like we did a Ramones cover was the first thing we did, Blitzkrieg Bop, which I didn't know the words to, and I still don't. And started writing kind of, you know, NoFX-y type songs, that was our aspiration, let's say, and playing a lot and stuff. And then the next thing that happened was, so I was quite bookish. I am quite bookish, and I sort of read Get in the Van and stuff like that. Like, I remember actually the way I got into Black Flag was I was reading a book about one of those kind of cheap kind of history of punk books you get in our price or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was just like a kind of sidebar about hardcore, and it had a photo of Black Flag, and everybody else in the book had like mohawks and safety pins and stuff. And there was this little photo of like 4 people wearing thrift store clothes with short hair, but the look in their eyes was the most intense look in the whole book. And it was like, who's that? Like, I want to know who that is.
This was what drew me into it. It was like going to the metal club on the weekends and like seeing the hardcore kids would be given, the DJ would like say, bring up your CDs and we'll let you play like 4 songs at the beginning of the night. And it was the most vicious, violent thing I'd ever seen in my life. And of course, as a teenage boy, I was entirely drawn to it.
Exactly. And but there was also something, obviously there was a fashion for 90s hardcore and all the rest of it, but it wasn't quite so sort of, I mean, clownish, do you know what I mean? It was much more kind of, it had a bit more of a street sort of vibe to it.
It was very serious as well.
Right, exactly. And as you say, as a teenage boy who has a lot of anger and hatred and aggression in your system, it was super appealing. And it wasn't as theatrical as metal, and it wasn't as kind of cartoonish as punk rock, and it was just something about it felt very intense, and there was a lot of politics to it, and that made a lot of sense to me at that point in my life, because I felt, as I say, very kind of alienated from the place I was and all this. So me and Ben and Chris started getting into hardcore. We got really into like, Refuse, Converge, Cave In, Boy Sets Fire's first record, all that kind of stuff. And me and Chris particularly wanted to kind of pursue that musical avenue, and Chang was like, fuck. He was like, fuck this.
4-4 or go fuck yourself.
Yeah, well, he was like, sounds like Smashing Pumpkins was his thing. We've been talking about more the kind of emo core type of stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he was just out, so he quit the band, and so I took over bass duties, and then we changed our name to Knee Jerk, and that was the beginning of Knee Jerk. And then the other thing that had happened is that the first show I went to was Agnostic Front at the Garage in December 1997, and it was Agnostic Front, Maximum Penalty, Morning Again, and Vision was the bill. It was an amazing bill.
I remember seeing that advert.
Yeah, it was so good. But and again, like, I sort of wasn't really all that clear on what hardcore was before I went to that show, and I met Lil at that show.
Oh, wow.
And he says, I don't really remember this, but he says I went up to the distro and said, I've got £10 and I want to buy some hardcore, and he was like, Jesus Christ, sold me a copy of Last House on the Left. And then took my address, and he sent me some mixtapes.
Lil was fantastic for that. I remember, like, back in the late 90s as well, he got my address, and I think he sent me the first Capdown EP.
Right, yeah.
Just like loads of just flyers and things to put down at gigs. And
I still hang out with Lil now.
I'd love to bump into him.
Yeah, I see him pretty regularly, actually.
Oh, cool.
To his enormous anger, his daughter Ramona is quite a big fan of my music, so he comes to my gigs sort of under sufferance. Do you know what I mean? Just being like, I don't want to be here. Anyway, we're good friends. But and it was like that was for me, because it was like, oh my god, hardcore's the thing that's happening now. Because the next thing the next show I went to was the last ever Area Effect show at the New Cross Inn in New Cross.
That must have been crazy.
And it was like all current UK bands, and there was a scene of people there, and it was just like, what is this? As far as I was concerned, you read about hardcore in a book and it's all about Black Flag, Manifest Degendes and bands in the early 80s, and it was just like, this is happening now. And pretty much at the first show that Area Effect show, I think it was where I met Seedy.
Oh, okay.
And a bunch of other people, including Paul Skipworth, and there was this really beautiful vibe to me, and I understand now there was a degree of kind of me wanting it to be like this, and a degree of rose-tinted spectacles.
Yeah.
But it seemed to me that there was this vibrant underground scene that was like full of kind of like energy and anger and righteousness and politics, all of which appealed to me. But also, it was like the barrier to entry was knowing it was happening. You didn't have to be cool. You didn't have to be like, down with a certain group of people.
You just had to want to get involved and do something.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like, you want to get involved? Cool, come in. And it was just so exciting to me. And then, I got in, me and Chris both, and got so into, like, particularly Knuckle Dust and Imbalance were the two bands that were just utterly foundational for me. And so then sort of Knee Jerk started forming.
Just quickly as well, that was Lil sent me the first Imbalance 7-inch March of the Yes Men. That was what he sent me as well. Yeah, so just
amazing.
Such a education.
But I think it was a really exciting time, and like I went on. I'm sure we're about to talk about this, but I went on to have my disagreements, shall we say, with some of the Knuckle Dust folks.
I'm not touching that.
But I mean, we can talk about it. But it's important to say that to this day, their first 2 EPs and their first record remain like, to me, that's hardcore.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh God, yeah.
They were my Black Flag in the sense that it wasn't a historical artifact. It was a band that I saw like a million times. You know, so the Evil Fest and going down to the Red Eye and all that.
I was living in Cardiff, 100 miles away from London, and I saw Knuckle Dust. Everyone in Cardiff saw Knuckle Dust more than any other hardcore band there is.
They played all the time.
Yeah, they're just legendary.
Yeah,
still are.
Right, exactly. And you're right, they're still playing, and hats off to them for that, you know. But so there was this, you know, it was just really exciting, this new thing in my life that was kind of, because, you know, I was initially a metalhead, so I had an interest in, I always loved Pantera and Sepultura and stuff.
Same, yeah.
And then I loved punk rock, and I loved the kind of aesthetics and the ideas of punk rock, and it was this combination of the two that was happening now, you know. And I also think that we were lucky to be part of a scene at a certain point in history.
Insanely lucky. I have been saying to everyone, like, since I was involved in like the years following, I was saying, what we're involved with right now is going to explode, become the biggest thing. It's going to be so much bigger than we can imagine. Right now, we are at just the beginning of it.
Right.
When we were booking like tours in the early 2000s, late 90s, you'd basically look at a map of the UK and say, right, so Sheffield is such and such, such and such, Manchester's such and such. It's like Manchester's, Mount Ward's and Boardman and...
I will like, so this was the next part of the story for me, is that, like, so, you know, it started going to shows. My first gig was opening for Boy Sets Fire, and Lil was putting on the show, and it was Boy Sets Fire and 30 Seconds to Armageddon and somebody else, 3-band bill, and basically me and Chris got Lil's phone number and just took it in turns to call him once every 40 minutes for about 36 hours until he just went for...
What the fuck?
He was like, for the love of God, you can have an opening slot, you can have 20 minutes at the Red Eye first on.
That's how you got the
Boy Sets Fire? Yeah. We just annoyed the piss out of Lil.
One time because I was trying to get Cameron onto... Cameron came over when Hellfest, the year after, I think they played Hellfest 2.
Yeah.
Then when Hellfest 3 happened, they were touring at the same time. They happened to be in London that day. And I remember having to go down and ask Lil, saying like, oh, can we get them on the bill? And I asked him twice, and it was, I think the last time I spoke to him, I'd said this is, you know, like one of those like moments of sheer embarrassment that you just carry for your life.
Yes, of course, yeah. And you think of it in the shower randomly.
Literally that. And he just took me into the toilets because they were doing the sound checks, and he was just shouted, they're not going to play.
Right.
And it was just that.
You know, I was in Cameron briefly.
I think you might have said that.
We'll come back to that.
I was briefly in them as well, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. But so like the first tour that we did, which was Knee Jerk and Abjure, we did the split with Skipworth. So we met Abjure. I knew CD was playing in Abjure, so that's when then we met Tom and Paul and Sam.
Yeah.
And they were kind of the same age as us and at a similar point. I mean, I think it's important to stay for the record. I think Abjure are a much, much better band than Knee Jerk ever was. Knee Jerk was a band who are kind of intellectual and artistic ambitions.
Abjure
massively
had their sound tighter. They knew what they were doing more, but like there was Knee Jerk was so much bigger though.
Yeah, but Knee Jerk to me, like our kind of like I say, our kind of artistic and intellectual ambitions massively outrun our musical capability. Do you know what I mean? I listen to what we did, and it's like I can see what we were trying to do, and it is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But like, I couldn't sing properly, and like we couldn't play well enough to do.
Dave Chang could polish it pretty well.
Yeah, he did. Although he quantized all the kick drums in a way that I still don't love. Anyway, but so we did that first tour, summer of '98, I believe, and it was me. It was Knee Jerk and Abjure in a van together, and we booked it. I seem to remember.
Just quickly, did the van have seats?
Yes, I believe it did. We found this guy from an advert in a rehearsal studio who could drive, who had a van. I mean, we were all like 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
And he was the weirdest guy ever. He got quite racist at one point in the tour.
Oh, shit.
He was getting us to like, because we were all eating in vegan restaurants and stuff, in a Lebanese restaurant somewhere.
So he was twisting the knife on some identity politics of his own.
The bill came back and he started counting the change and he went, never trust an Arab. And we were all just like, shut the fuck up. And so that was weird. But my memory is that Fracture Zine, which was so important to everybody, I think, had a kind of BYL kind of page, like a Book Your Own Life sort of thing, that had a list of kind of, have you got, oh my God.
A little gift for you.
Oh my God, May 98.
Issue 2.
Holy shit. I used to read this cover to cover.
Same, everyone did. It was the internet for the 90s.
It was. And you'd read the record. I remember when Knee Jerk got a review in Fracture. I've still got it.
The
I found
demo.
it. I think actually the first album, quote unquote, the Helpless I Cry thing, and
okay,
and like it got a good review off Russell Remains, and like
okay.
that made my day. I thought that like we'd made it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no,
Speak
amazing. Speak of the devil. But yeah, so we booked this tour from a payphone at school, me and Chris.
That's what everyone did.
Yeah.
I had to, all of my early shit was booked from payphones because my house phone was barred for outgoing calls because my brother was using the phone to play Football Manager games over the phone. So my mum was like, she got a huge phone bill one time and it was like, right, no more phone for you.
Right, amazing.
So yeah, just down to the end of the road and using the phone box to just ring up Glasper and chat for an hour or whatever.
Right, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we booked this, it was like a 2-week tour, and we went out and we did it, and like half of it was just catastrophically bad. We got to Salisbury and the venue had never even heard of us. They were just like, what are you talking about? We've got a gig tonight. And they're like, no you don't. And we ended up finding a pub around the corner and just loading our shit in and playing to like 4 people.
Okay.
But then like there were some cool shows on there. We played 120 Rats in Leeds.
Nice. Yeah.
And that bill was, there were 2 tours that they put together. It was 30 second, it was End of the Century Party and Arsehole Parade.
Whoa!
And then
we played with them in Germany. They're good fucking dudes.
Yeah, they were great. And but like the squat was getting kind of like renovated or demolished or something the next day.
No, it was always like that.
Oh, okay. They told us that there was something happening the next day.
Yeah.
And there were people just like smashing holes in the wall while we were playing and stuff. And it was rammed. I remember that. But I just remember being kind of like, this is terrifying, and maybe my mum was right about
down on
punk.
I think it's down near Meanwood Road for the Leeds music historians.
The other thing about that show, which I love, is when we left for the tour, the guy who ran this like squatted rehearsal space in Holloway where Knee Jerk used to practice, he gave us a tip as we were leaving because we were so young. He said, and this is obviously pre-sat-nav, pre-Google Maps, all that kind of business.
Yeah.
And he said, if you can't find the venue, drive to the shit end of town and ask someone who's wearing a leather jacket. And we got to Leeds and we couldn't find 120 Rats because it's not exactly on the road atlas. So we drove to the crap end of town. It looks horrible over there, let's go that way. There was a guy wearing a Motorhead t-shirt and a leather jacket, and we were like, excuse me, do you know 120 Rats is? And he went, yes, over there. And we were just like, it worked.
There's a new venue in Leeds, a small punk space, and on the flyers it literally just says Ask a Punk.
Right, amazing.
It's got all sorts of, they make up a new name for it for every flyer, but it's that sort of deal.
Yeah. But so and then that night we stayed at the Bob Tilton house. I remember that.
Oh, sick.
And then
I think that's just up the road, isn't it?
Really? And then we drove the next show. Sorry, do you want to grab? Is there? Let's drink some non-alcoholic beer.
Right. So we have a non-alcoholic beer, care of Mash Gang. Let's see what the hell this is like.
Let's see what that sounds like.
This is MG Cultra.
That's very tasty. Yeah, damn, I'm sold. Yeah, look, I'm keeping up my straight edge for one more afternoon because I was straight edge back then.
When I first met you, you had was it straight edge written on your feet?
No, I had X's on my shoes. That was it.
Oh, was it vegan as well?
No, I was never vegan.
Oh, okay.
I was veggie.
Yeah.
And I always told everybody that I was going to go vegan soon. As soon as I got over to, I was the worst veggie ever. I lived off cheese pizza for 12 years. It was awful. But so we did, and then with the last show of the tour was in Dundee. Was it Engage?
Yes.
Yeah. So what was the name of the main guy from Engage? Paul. Yeah. Paul from Engage books. Druthi Nebors was the name of the venue.
Okay.
And we played with Knee Jerk Abjure Engage. And that was the first tour. The other thing from that tour is that Abjure would always play second, and they would always finish with a cover of No Spiritual Surrender by Inside Out, and we'd all get up and sing it with them, and so we'd all be on stage. Nice. So I got my second ever tattoo, got my No Spiritual Surrender tattoo. I got my first one is a UKHC tattoo up here.
Sick.
That I got done when I was like 16. Which you're not supposed to do. It was. We did that first tour, and by the end of that, I think that we had sort of established, I don't want to say a name as in like we were movers and shakers, but like people on the scene knew that we existed by that point. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And after the tour we did the split, Knee Jerk and Abjure, Don't Clap It Startles Me, which Paul Skipworth put out on Skipworth. And I remember the release day for that was at the Crown in Peterborough, and it was Good Clean Fun for headlining, and then a bunch of other bands, and Knee Jerk Jaw were on the bill, and I think we sold 100 copies
fucking
one day, and we were like, we're fucking Motley Crue, man.
Peterborough was always like such a big, it's really strange talking about places around the UK now, and it's like Boston was a huge spot for the punk hardcore scene,
right?
In the early 2000s, but like Peterborough in the late 90s was insane.
Triple H, Mendes Tab, Positive Outlook, all that.
All the Positive Outlook kids, all they did was just fucking brilliant. They really held the scene together in those early. It was like them, Household Name. There were a handful of labels, but like Positive Outlook Records with I'm blanking on his name, Gav.
Yeah, Gav. Yeah, Gav.
Yeah.
And, but I just remember, not that long ago, I ran into some people I was chatting to somebody who turned out to be from Peterborough, who was going on about how nothing's ever happened in Peterborough, and I'm like, who knew? And it turns out that
things happen.
Yeah, it turns out we're old now, because I was like, were you not there in 1999?
There's a pub that's no longer there.
Yeah, I saw somebody sent me a photo of the demolished pub. And the back room.
It's like our CBGBs now, isn't it? We've got we're at that age where we've got our own CBGBs.
Right, but it was funny because I said to him in the 1999 there's Positive Outlooks, and this guy was like, I was born in 2000, and I was like, oh fuck. But that's what I mean, and looking forward a little bit for a second, like one of the things that I love is that there are people I run into to this day from those years who, like Matt Cabani in Italy, or remember Italian Matt?
Was he the guy that filmed?
Yeah, the camcorder.
Yeah, he filmed everything. It's either the slick hair.
He was my promoter in Italy for like a decade, and so
it's all these personalities that you see around, and it's like Anthea that now works the PR side.
Yeah, I work with her every day. Do you know what I mean? And
it blows my mind when you just see all of those connected dots.
Right, but that's kind of what I'm saying. And even like Sheep, who's tour managing Bring Me the Horizon, I think was the last band he was out with.
Who's that? Jared Leto's band, I think I saw.
30 Seconds Till Mars, that's the one.
He's doing. He's doing all sorts, and Sheep is just doing fantastic things also. But
so that's the thing. And as I say, I see Lil pretty regularly, and there's just I had a wonderful chat with Andy from Imbalance not that long ago, because there was a song on my last album but one the song's called My Bad, and it's an old school fast hardcore song, and as far as I'm concerned,
you'd said that it was basically Imbalance.
It's basically an Imbalance song, so I sent him a copy of it, and it was just like, for whatever it's worth, this is me tipping my hat to you. and it was a #1 album, and he was just like, damn, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I love that band so much, man. But yeah, so and then Knee Jerk existed for a bit longer. We toured with Symbiosis.
Yes.
Remember them?
Yes.
With again, Gav, I think, was their singer. Who took,
Gaz. Naked Gaz.
Took all his clothes off all the time. And I still see Matt from Symbiosis for here and there.
Oh, nice. Matt Ward is one of the loveliest dudes ever.
Isn't he just?
Matt and his wife, Gemma.
Yeah, and so we did that.
He was in Good Clean Fun for a minute as well.
Was he?
He toured the world with them. Yeah.
Really? I saw Mr. Issa a few times recently, because we reconnected. Like, somebody introduced us at a show. He came to one of my shows somewhere in the States, and I was like, I don't know if you remember us, and he was like, yeah, I totally do, which was a lovely thing, because there's no special reason why he should. Do you know what I mean?
Good Clean Fun played, I think, 7,500 gigs in the UK over the years. But
they did.
They played more gigs in the UK than just any other UK band, I think.
Although, that is an interesting thing, though, that you mentioned that, because, like, one of the things I remember from this era was it always sort of slightly caught my attention that quite often there'd be an American hardcore band would come through. For example, like Walls of Jericho played the Swan in Tottenham, and Knee Jerk opened for them. And they were just...
Humble brag.
But they were just incredible, and like they were so much tighter than any of our bands. And no disrespect to the UK hardcore scene.
Yeah.
They just wiped the floor with us.
It's seeing that next level of things whereby... And this is what I was going to get into, the what kind of drew you into this forever on tour type mindset.
Right.
Once you have that awareness of American bands and what their system is over there, that they literally just drive across the biggest fucking thing you can imagine, and they're just playing gigs unendingly.
Yeah, right.
And it's essentially as long as the band exists, they are playing gigs constantly.
Exactly.
And it felt like as much that, no shade on what you've done, what you've achieved, because it's insane. But it feels almost the game is to just, it's longevity. in however you can find it.
Yeah, totally. But it's sort of just
if you're American, but
yeah.
For the British bands don't seem to do, and it felt like
it's because our country's so much smaller. Do you know what I mean? There's only so many times you can
and
play.
You can't normalize telling a band you need to play for 182 days of the year
because you just run out of places to play. Everyone just gets pissed off.
Yeah.
And so I really noticed like the musical tightness of those American bands coming through.
Who was drumming with them early doors? Was it? There was a lad I met who was drumming for Walls of Jericho one time, and he was ridiculous.
Right. I mean, I can't remember that, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and it really made me want to tour hard.
They were ex-Earth Mover, weren't they?
Yes, yeah. Speaking of Earth Mover, do you remember when you drove us down the M1 at like 400 miles an hour?
Literally no recollection of that. I really don't think that happened, to be honest.
We all had like amps and cymbals like and guitars like balanced on the laps in the back, and I was like, we're gonna die.
My memory from that, my two memories from that one were the one I've mentioned to you before, where you were like, the whole way, can we get to London? Can we get to London? Can we get to London? Because you were meeting up with Sarah. I believe.
Wow, yeah.
You really wanted to get to London. Like, we stopped for a coffee, and it was like, have you finished your coffee yet?
Oh God, I'm sorry.
That
sounds deeply annoying.
It's all gravy. The deeply annoying part was that the drive up, there was this like unwieldy acoustic guitar that was sat fucking there in the car.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, it's there. Well, you're a band, whatever. This is the job that I'm doing to help you out.
Because we used to do that acoustic bit at the end of.
And we get to the gig. We get to the gig. You play the gig, and the acoustic guitar is used for like 30 seconds at the end of the last song. And it was just, so this is what it was for. Cool, thanks.
That was, you know what? That was Woodhouse Community Centre with Lyre.
Just up the road. The 1999 Lyre All Day.
Yeah, I remember it well. And there was one time we did that, and the acoustic guitar broke. It like folded in half, basically, like as I was playing it, because the neck had snapped. Or it had detached from the body, and I started playing it, and it just started doing this, and I was like,
beautiful.
No.
The crowd are like, we'll just finish it.
Yeah, that was. I mean, again, like Knee Jerk, we had some pretty. I mean, from some angles, pretentious things going on.
We all did, though.
Yeah.
We were just teenagers.
No, totally. And like when we were pretty kind of artistically fearless is another way of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But I do remember, like, I met somebody the other day who was telling me this. Knee Jerk's last ever show was in Nottingham, right? And it was a
venue that you can't remember.
No idea. But it might have been the Old Angel, but I'm not sure. But anyway, we played, and this was at a point where people were paying attention to Knee Jerk. Like the EP had done well, and we were working on
of course.
Kissing.
The album came out after you'd split.
Exactly. But like, you know, I remember we played Wire Wool, and like we got a sing-along at a show, and it was like, holy shit, that's the first sing-along I ever had in my life. And so, you know, it felt interesting. And then my memory of it, I can't really remember the show, but just afterwards we went back to this house we were staying, and basically Ben and Chris turned around and said they didn't want to do the band anymore.
Okay.
And I was totally gutted. And I stayed up all night and got a coach back to London at like 6 a.m.
Okay.
Like heartbroken.
Yeah.
And not least because at the time I'd been booking, because this was just before we left school, and I had been booking. Do you remember Alcatraz, the French band?
Yes.
So Séverine from Alcatraz.
They played with Cameron on the 2000 on the 2000 tour. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So Séverine was the bass player in Alcatraz.
In Swans? No. In Tottenham?
Yeah, probably in this one in Tottenham, yeah. But so we used to write to each other all the time, and she was helping me book a European squat tour for Knee Jerk for that next summer, and then those two were like, yeah, fuck this, we don't do it anymore. And I was gutted and pissed off and everything. Not least because I think the album was finished at that point, we hadn't released it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I met somebody the other day who I can't remember his name, but he basically said, I was at the last ever Knee Jerk show, and I said, oh my God, that's amazing. And he was like, he said, you guys are the weirdest thing I've ever seen. He was like, you know, you had these songs that we knew and they were excited to see, and then you showed up and he said you played one song at the beginning that we knew and one song at the end, and in the middle you did this like experimental jam thing whilst Sarah read poetry over the top of it.
Oh.
And for like 40 minutes. And and I was just like, did we? And he was like, he was like, it went down really badly, like no one liked it. And I was like,
maybe that's why Chris and Ben were like...
Yeah, possibly. But I maintain it must have been Chris's idea. That is such a Chris thing to do.
Chris's idea to get your girlfriend to read poetry.
Yeah, okay, fair point. But just, I remember, I mean, this is such a 90s thing, but like having endless discussions about how to make shows non-hierarchical. It's like, can we have no stage? Can we have bands play one song each in the round or something, so that there isn't like a headliner and an opener, because we're trying to just smash hierarchy and
a lot of those things, they kind of come across as a little bit bullshitty. Like, I think it's you've got to allow the space for those moments, though, because I find like the Crime Thing type stuff. So Crime Thing back in the day was really very extreme.
Was it Catharsis, the band that they got?
Catharsis were like the mouthpiece for that thing.
Right, yeah. Sorry.
Brian, I think, was heavily involved in the Crime thing, but it always struck me that, like, 'cause we all knew people that were like a little too far gone in the Crime Thing.
Yeah, and there was the whole Freegan thing. Remember that?
Exactly. Like, if you can dumpster dive it, then it's technically all ethically sound. But it just, to those people, it felt like there's a great analogy of, like, it's like swimming in the ocean. If you kind of go out too far, you're basically lost.
Yeah,
totally. The tide's going to pull you out. But it was those people that were willing to do that, though. They kind of flew the flag for how things could be in other ways, and you wouldn't necessarily take them up on all of the offers, but you cherry pick.
Yeah, totally.
And it felt like those were the moments that if you didn't have the extremes, you wouldn't have the moment to be able to cherry pick those lesser.
Yeah, absolutely. And my respect for the people who pursued that stuff properly is pretty endless. But I mean, at a certain point, I think quite consciously, a lot of those people were like detaching themselves from mainstream society, which is a choice, and I respect it, but at the same time, I'm not sure that's quite what I wanted to do.
It falls into that sort of like logical endpoint of thinking on things, of just...
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of, there is, let me phrase this carefully, but it's like, there was a degree of slight cultishness about some of it, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
What I mean by that is there was a sort of competition for extremism. It was like, well, they're doing this, okay, well, we'll do this, and like push
this was
further.
what pushed me away from the straight edge thing, because it was just like, just the rules and the silliness and the
and it's a very adolescent thing. It's just it becomes about sort of it becomes performative to a degree. It's just like showing off to each other about how pure you can be about something. The other thing that I think is interesting to talk about, my perception of what happened in about 2000, 2001 more, I would say, which is broadly where I would say that I kind of moved on from the hardcore scene, maybe 2001, 2002. But essentially, like in 97, 98 or whatever, the scene was so small that it was musically undifferentiated, right? So you'd have Spy vs. Spy and Knuckle Dust on the same bill, and it was fine because A, everybody was musically open-minded about it, but B, there just weren't enough people to have two scenes.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? It was just like, we can't have two shows.
We need the numbers.
Right, exactly. And
or even just a backline.
Second ever Knee Jerk show was opening for Some Factor and Spy vs. Spy upstairs in the garage. That was cool. But like, so we so there was this, but it sort of, therefore accidentally there was a kind of sense of camaraderie thing going on, and it did get a little bigger as time went by, and all of this in some ways was sort of a forerunner to what then came out of Wales, where we were talking about Funeral for a Friend and all that kind of thing. But anyway, there was this moment where it sort of got big enough that it started to separate into two separate things, and suddenly there was the kind of emo-ish, indie-ish thing, and then there was Blackfish Records, and then suddenly the Knuckle Dust and things got quite a lot more kind of quote-unquote tough guy. Do you know what I mean? And suddenly it was like LBU and all that kind of business, and Beatdown Fury and those kind of bands, and like it just seemed way more kind of atavistic to me. Do you know what I mean? And like,
what's that word?
Just kind of like spiky and rejectionist and aggressive and like unfriendly. Do you know what I mean? And
that was what I found so much coming to London. Like, I can legit tell you off camera names of people I'd walk up to and try to talk to at a gig, and you just kind of get this stonewallness.
Right, but that to me that came in over time, because I mean, early Knuckle Dust stuff, it was all about unity, all that kind of business. Stand my ground, Knuckle Dust, 1999 to infinity. I remember that. That was so good.
The dark side versus the east side, was
it? Yeah.
And
I mean, Stamping Grounds deserve a shout as well. I love that.
Fuck
band.
yeah, Glasper.
Yeah.
Love that dude.
Yeah, I mean, and the books that he's written about punk and hardcore are so good.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, and it just started to kind of separate a bit, and like I remember kind of before, because Knee Jerk broke up in 2001 or 2000 maybe,
if not. Yeah,
it must have been. It was definitely 2000 at least, kind of thing. But like, even I felt like we were caught in between a rock and a hard place a little bit, and simultaneously, once Blackfish Records started up, I seem to remember that Lil kind of went much more in a ska-core direction as far as household name records went.
Big D and the Kids, and there were a lot of
fucking, and Lightyear and all those kind of bands. And but it just sort of suddenly felt like it had got big enough that it could sort of separate out of it, and I was really sad about that at the time. I mean, I was happy.
Don't rest your hand on that. Sorry, you're going to get ink on you.
Right. Okay. No. I love it.
Your hands are black already.
I'll do the X's. I've covered them up. Anyway, it just sort of, I was pleased. I mean, I was pleased that more people were interested in what was going on, definitely. And even at the time, I like to think that I was trying not to be that kind of like, you weren't here when it started kind of person. Because I was aware that when I arrived, that clearly something had been happening for a while.
Oh, God, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, and it just sort of, and then there was an incident. Essentially, I got punched in the head by Pierre at a show because I slagged him off in an interview, which was the first interview I ever did. But I said that he was a tough guy, and that I wasn't into that. And the reason for that is
this was with Paul, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But the reason I said that in the interview was because at the Sick of It All Indecision, they did 2 nights at the Garage, remember that? Sick of It All headlining Indecision main support. And I was down there for both shows, and at the second show, Indecision were on, and Pierre was like wimbling around in the pit and like just smacked me, and like not on purpose, but like took me out hard, and I missed the rest of the show, and I was pissed off about that.
That's a fair one.
So
Indecision,
I then got asked in the interview, what do you think about violent dancing? And I said, I think it's fucking bullshit.
You probably could have prefaced it.
I could have put it better. I mean,
I mean, it's like it could have actually been a conversational point.
It could have done.
I know that Triple H obviously had their song Pitbull.
Right, which I loved. You know, learn to move to the back of the crowd.
Another kid down.
Windmill kickbox.
Another kid down. Time to move to the back of the crowd.
And it.
Thank you, Dan Chapman.
Yeah. And
Positive Outlook Records.
So good, but like, so there was. You know, so I mean, I'll take my oil like I was being a prick in an interview or whatever. But so Pierre came down to the Walls of Jericho show and sort of punched me in the head.
Yeah.
And that really sucked because I loved his band, you know. And I mean, he's older than me. And it's important to say that all of this was quarter of a century ago. And there is no animus on my part about any of this.
I was curious on that. Kids. So have you like sort of?
I've never spoken to him again, but I have played Knuckle Dust on Radio 1.
Okay.
In my time, and with love and respect, because I do love and respect that.
So there needs to be a hand across the wall.
Yeah, you know. I mean, we weren't really friends anyway.
No. But it'd be nice though. I can just imagine like Mongol Horde, Knuckle Dust. Oh, sorry, what are you called now? Mingle Hard.
Yeah. Let's not get into that.
Controversies. Have we got? Do we want to be wrapping up? We're at 37 minutes.
No. I mean, we'll chat for a little longer. I mean, I've got to eat some food at some point quite soon. But anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm loving this. Because again, it's
dude, I've waited for so long for this.
The number of people you can talk to any of this shit about is pretty limited. It's interesting as well having this conversation because it's sort of just as I was trying to date kind of endpoints for me, it sort of occurred to me that like we're talking about 3-4 years here of my life, like at the most.
That's been half an hour, yeah.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like in my mind, in my sort of. Like emotionally, it feels like it was a decade. Do you know what I mean?
Because it was like the apprentice years almost.
Exactly. You know.
Sorry, the apprenticeship years.
Yeah,
and it's where all of those steep learning curves are. As short as they may be time-wise, there's so much that's packed in.
And also, you know, in those years of your life, I mean, you are just drowning in new experiences, and it's a really important time and all that. But it's like I sort of came out the end of it. Knee Jerk broke up. I'd spent a year just kind of doing nothing musically speaking. I was just working telesales jobs in London and like buying records if I ever had any money and that kind of thing. And then Ben from Knee Jerk formed a new band. He was working at Tower Records and he was working with 2 people, Cameron and Julia, who wanted to form a band that sounded like Queens of the Stone Age. So 3 of them were playing, and then they didn't have a singer, and I came in and started trying to sing like Dennis Licks, and the other two fucking hated it. They were just like, what is this bullshit? And I'm like yapping away, rap, rap, rap. And then eventually they couldn't find anybody else, so they were like, fine, and that became Million Dead. So, and Million Dead at the beginning did kind of exist on the fringes, let's say, of the UKHC scene, because me and Ben, you know, when you're a new band starting out, it's like we knew where to get gigs.
I remember hearing you on like Rock Sound Radio or something.
Yeah, so Julia and Cameron, neither of them had anything to do with the hardcore scene, and Julia had an office job at a major label. We were never on a major label, but what it meant is that she knew what a manager and a booking agent was, and like she knew a couple of journalists and this kind of thing, so she was quite keen for Million Dead to be an overground band, should we say?
Yes,
you know what I mean? And I wasn't averse by that point either. So, like I say, the first kind of year or so of Million Dead's existence, we played shows with hardcore bands and that kind of thing.
But when you look at it though, because you've got on your website literally every gig you've ever played, all the bands you've played. When you break down, which I have, I've got spreadsheets, Frank.
Oh, God.
When you break it down and look at the dates that you've played, to look at Million Dead, it was just like a sea of London dates. Up until a point, I think, was it maybe Funeral for a Friend or something?
The first national tour we did was with Pitch Shifter, actually.
Sick. We've just come back around. Did they play Trees?
I think so. I mean, Mark was definitely there because I saw Mark, but remains a dear friend and a lovely guy.
And again, just quickly, fuck you, because this, the sheer amount of times I'm online and it's just like, I met Henry Rollins, I met fucking.
Oh yeah. Well, I've been very fortunate in that.
You've been very fortunate in life in general, which is all well and good, but it's the Rollins things. Those are like the moments where like we truly get to be. Fuck you.
Yeah, no. Well, Rollins is playing Lost Evenings this year, and I am turning inside
Lost
out
Evenings,
about that.
your own international curated festival.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And we have Pedro the Lion last year. That was a big one for me.
Nice.
Maybe we should have Knuckle Dust. That would be cool. I'm not even kidding. That would be
I'm
awesome.
not when I'm laughing. I'm like, that is perfect.
That's I'm going to write that down somewhere. But yeah, so there was. Some Million Dead went and did what they did, but like you say, apprenticeship is a really good word for it, because like I learned a lot about life and about music and about how to handle yourself, and boring stuff about how to tour for no money and all that kind of thing, and book shows and carry your own gear and blah 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 blah. But there was also like, there are times when I look back on the hardcore scene and it was like at least the hardcore scene that we were part of, and it's like, it was a bunch of kids just who didn't really know anything about what they were doing. But I'm so proud to have been a very, very small part of it, because it's like ultimately it was completely sui generis. It was completely self-created. Do you know what I mean? No one told us what to do. Nobody told us what we could or couldn't do. We made it ourselves, or people made it themselves, and I was lucky enough to be standing on the edge. But like, it was so remarkable to me looking back. I mean, the department's like the fucking balls on us.
I think it's a little more hands-on than that. I think that like because we kind of picked up from, it was almost like, have you ever seen sort of in, say, crisis scenarios where people are passing sandbags along a chain?
Sure.
Almost like that was the way the knowledge kind of came along.
Totally.
That like there wasn't like, there were no gods, no masters, obviously type mindset, but it was no parental figures as such.
Yeah.
And it was like just a big brother saying, oh, well, you just do this. Oh, well, you just ring up the venue and say, I'd like to book it. And that's how you do it. Oh, and this guy, ring this number and book a vocal PA with this guy. And
totally. And
little tidbits of knowledge.
Here's a place you can do photocopying of flyers for free or for cheap or whatever. And you put 4 of them on a page, and then you get pairs and you cut them out or whatever.
Learning that was just like so transformed. Just learning the little things of like, you can do this, and then that kind of opens up you can then do that. It's
totally. And then I mean, this is a safe space to talk about this, but it's like when I started doing solo stuff, I had this moment in my life where I started living and hanging out in this bar called Nambucca, and it was sort of tangential to kind of like the Holloways, Libertines, that sort of thing, and some of which I have love for, and I played a lot of early shows with those people and stuff. Dave from the Holloways was best man at my wedding, all this kind of thing. But everybody in kind of like the indie scene were doing their first tours when they were like 23, 24, 25 years old. And it was just like, what have you been doing for the last 8 years? Like, why are you only starting now? And they'd do their first tour and they'd have a guitar tech. Do you know what I mean? And I'd be like, fuck you, man. Like, and I didn't even know what a guitar tech was for years.
I think I don't want to dwell on this one because it's my personal perspective and not something I want to draw you into. But like that thing of when you saw recently, there were like talks online about bands talking about how hard it is to exist as a band, and they'd say like, oh well, this is the reality. We obviously need to kind of the hotel for the night, and we've got our tech on, and they would be listing off this catalogue of things, and it would just be like, if this is what you need to do a tour, go fuck yourself, because it's
no, but I mean, I completely agree. It's
I can appreciate some people if they get into it via a certain trajectory.
Of course, but this is you learn how to do it for nothing. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I mean, to this day, I'm proud to say I've never ever had tour support. I've never ever been given money by a label to make up a shortfall from a tour. Every single tour I've ever done in my entire life, the budget has to be balanced from the money that's coming in.
Okay.
And like, you know, now we're sitting on a tour bus right now. Do you know what I mean? I've got tax, I've got crew, and all the rest of it, and it works. But like, you know, I was remembering. So the Brudenell where we're playing today, which I love, we played here. Last time we played here full band was the 31st of March 2008, which I remember because it was my little sister's birthday. Beautiful. And it was the day that Love Iron Song came out. But the thing about that was like we didn't have any crew on that tour. Do you know what I mean? It was just me and my band, house, sound guys, whatever. We'd carry on shit, restring guitars. I did the merch. Do you know what I mean? We didn't have a merch guy because what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so you know that kind of mindset continued through what I do for a long time, and you know, even now, like this summer, I've been doing a bunch of solo sets at festivals. I want to do a solo set at festival. Me and my buddy, thank you. Me and my buddy Dougie, who's my production manager, go down together, and I restring my guitar and I plug myself in and we do it. And I don't mean this sounds a tiny bit fucking Princess and the Pea, but I guess the point is, it's like, you know, something he's doing, do it. And that's the thing about DIY as a concept, right? And like, you know, I'm aware that it would enrage a lot of people if I describe what I do now as DIY, right? But I maintain that there is a mindset, and the thing about DIY was, it was like, if no one else is going to do it for you, then you do it yourself.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a slightly different way of how many people would phrase it, and I understand and respect that. But ultimately for me, it's like, I don't book my own shows anymore because I have a booking agent. But I did for ages. And at a certain point, somebody else offered to do it, and it was like, cool, I'll hand that off. And
what I found, and what we found on the show, interestingly, because it's a lot of like bartenders and people in just grafting trades and what have you, but they've a lot of the times ended up there from the musical scenes. So you kind of do the bands and then end up in a bar sort of thing. I'm sure you know a lot of those sorts of characters.
Yeah, of course.
For the people that I've talked to that have got that DIY scene background, it really carries over, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a bar, whether it's tattooing, or just office jobs, fucking anything. But it's in your DNA. I think it's that, and maybe going back to the term apprenticeship is a great term for that, because it is like, it's where you normalize how you do things. Right, and it's something he's doing, cool, I'll do it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to stand around kind of like kicking my heels waiting for somebody to show up. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that needs carrying over there, right, fine, I'll do that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And there's just this proactivity, almost, I want to say, which I think is beautiful, and something that is definitely like infected my life and view of the world and all the rest of it. And for me personally, that comes from hardcore. And yeah, and I mean, you know, it was a beautiful thing to probably to wrap up at this point, but like, I definitely feel incredibly fortunate and grateful to have been part of that. And also, I think, as all of the politics and the DIY and the attitudes and mindset and all of that aside, there was just some really good music, you know, and like, we are talking about the style of music ultimately here at the end of the day. And I still listen to Imbalance pretty regularly. I still listen to Knuckle Dust. Stand My Ground from time to time. I mean, I love that band. They were super great. So they've got their moments. Yeah,
but and then
Officer Down will forever be an absolute banger.
Exactly, and then also Canvas.
Oh yeah,
I still listen to Canvas. Yeah, like a lot, you know.
For me, it was more Human Fly, because they dominated the lead scene for years and just got epic.
I remember seeing Canvas when they opened for Converge upstairs the garage, and they gave Converge a run for their money, and at the time Converge were like the all-time greats kind of thing, and then Canvas, they put on a good show.
They came on with their mirror ball or something.
Yeah, and they had projector kind of loops and stuff, and
they were amazing for that. Yeah, I think it was Dan, the drummer, was really into that sort of weird. He was deep in the sort of the Cops and Robbers LS6 weird arty scene.
Right, which was amazing, and it was so unique. And I remember they played middle of the bill at Evil Fest 1 at the garage, and it was just super odd. No, Evil Fest 2 at the garage, which was incidentally where I met Itch, who was later in King Blues.
Oh yeah.
We met each other that day, long time ago. Anyway, but yeah, so there was just some really, really cool music. Yeah. And it's a cool thing to have been part of.
Entirely. I was wondering on the, because again, going back to the perusing your tour dates thing. Right. So, there must have been a point, you got that? There must have been a point where you were, and I kind of, in my mind, was writing this storyline of, you got frustrated with Million Dead's lack of touring. and you were like, do you know what? I could spend half the year on tour. I'm going to fucking do that. And then you basically kind of worked towards that, because if you look at the numbers, it literally 2007 I think was 48% of the year on tour.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay.
The following year you hit 52%.
Amazing.
And it seemed to be a thing. And then obviously around 2016 it began to dip. For reasons.
Sure.
But,
well, we all got older. We got harder. I think it was more. I mean, I was in Million Dead until Million Dead did not exist anymore. Do you know what I mean? That's important for me. I was super committed to that band, and it fell apart for personal reasons which I won't go into. But like, my decision to do solo stuff came after I realised the band was going to end. Do you know what I mean? I didn't like leave the band to do solo stuff. It was more like I have to do something now. And the band ended in a way that at the time I felt quite betrayed by. I'm old enough and wiser, let's say, to know that I was probably as responsible for it as anybody else. But at the time, my perception was that I'd been let down by the members of the band. So
again.
And so the point was, it was like, if it's just me and a guitar, no one can stand me up. Do you know what I mean? Like, and also it's cheap as shit. Like my fee for gigs was 50 quid for ages, and then it went up to 50 quid plus train fare when my young person's rail card ran out, because suddenly it was costing me like 40 quid.
And again, back to the DNA DIY type thing of just, you can't bring yourself to charge more. You can't be like, I'm going to make a profit on this.
Right, it was, and I'd do this penultimate song of the show. Can I sleep on anyone's floor tonight, please? I did that for like 3 years. I was touring. I didn't drive at the time, so I was touring on the train, and I had a rucksack, and I had a CD that had a CD burner in it, and I had this 4-track demo, and I'd sit on the train just burning CDs,
but and
then with a Sharpie.
Was how it was back then.
Yeah, totally. But I learned that from Knee Joke and from being involved with the hardcore scene. It was just like, nobody else is going to do this for me, so I'm going to fucking do it. And I was completely self-contained for the longest time, which incidentally is a big part of the reason why I started the show count thing. I mean, Ben counted the shows in Million Dead, and I thought he was a bit mental at the time. And then when the band broke up, I was really glad he'd done it, because there's a record. Do you know what I mean? And then, but a big part of the reason I started counting my solo shows is there was nobody I can call to get tour memories off, because it was just me. You know, and obviously I hung out with people every day. It was, in some ways, it was a hyper social existence, because if you're sleeping on somebody's floor after a show, you've got to put out socially a bit. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
But
also next time you come around town, it's like every tour you'd be bumping into these people that had like put you up so many times.
Oh, no, they're all still on the guest list.
That's what I mean. Suddenly you've got like this family unit across the UK.
Completely. Well, and indeed across the world, because I did a bunch of that in the States as well. Me and Josh English from 6 Going on 7 got in a car and drove around the States for about 3 months, and like stayed on random people's floors and stuff. And you know, I saw a bunch of people at 2000 Trees Festival last weekend whose floor I used to sleep on, and I was in Seattle, and my buddy Eric, who put on a show for me and Josh when no one cared, and you know, he came down to the show, we hung out. It was you know, I slept on my bus because I had to get to the next show, but like, you know, we had dinner, we hung out. It was and it's a lovely form of friendship just to kind of go, remember the good old days kind of thing, you know. So that kind of DNA, that spirit kind of continues.
I want to quickly just we've got some silliness we're doing at the moment, because obviously there's been some backlash at times.
Right.
What the hell happened? What the hell happened with? Are you not allowed to talk about women or something?
Apparently
was
not.
That the crux?
I mean, that was a difficult time for me. I really, really cared about that record. I started trying to write a history record because I care.
You did it so well as well. It was like the complete package of the podcast that accompanied it. It was the stories, it was right. There was a friend of mine that was involved in I think she was one of the singers. Every part of that, like the production staff being female.
Yeah, and there was a real there was a lot of thought went into trying to handle it the right way, because I obviously wasn't oblivious to that issue, let's say. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I got every part of it right, but there was definitely a bit of it also, the other problem with it, I think, and you might think I'm mad to say this, but it was just as the kind of my first kind of career peak was kind of slowing down, and therefore you become a target that people want to find a reason to get you. Do you know what I mean? And you know, the tallest poppy and all that kind of business, and there was a certain amount of glee in some of the kind of attacks. It was like, finally something to fuck this guy for. And it was, you know, it's a shame because, like, you know, the Enemy review said, I haven't listened to this record and I'm not going to. They reviewed the concept and gave it like 1 star, and it was just like, I mean, that's not doing your fucking job, is what that is.
That's literally people gunning for you.
Yeah, it is. And like, I mean, you know, I'll take my oil. Ultimately, you can't spend your time running around the world trying to alert people to your existence and then be sad when not everybody loves you. That's fucking pathetic. But it sucked because I just put a lot of work into that record, and I think there are some really good songs on that album, which I'm really, really proud of. I'm sort of waiting for the day when somebody somewhere decides to be contrarian enough to decide that it's my best record, and then I'll go, haha. But I mean, at the same time, it wasn't like the term that got used at the time as a frontline record. You know, it was a bit of a. I had to argue with my label quite hard to do it because they were just like, "What the fuck? You want to do a history album with a podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." It was very artistic, let's say, but it's just a bit kind of like, I suppose I could have done 12 songs about kind of men from history, but like that, I didn't sit down to write songs about women from history. I sat down to write songs about people who I felt had been underserved by the historical record.
I remember reading about one of the characters you'd sort of ended up having to do your own research and really digging in, finding the sort of the museum's archives. And
I did. I mean, I did do some proper research on it, and that obviously I enjoyed doing that because I'm very passionate about that kind of stuff as well. But I mean, it was cool. You know, I went to Dodge City Museum and I met with the curator, and she was telling me all about Dora Hand, and you know, and I learned a lot of stuff about it, and I tried to sort of represent that in the songs properly, and you know, I like the podcast, and I guess the thing about it is, like, once you get past the kind of gatekeepery type people who were deciding that I should fuck off and all the rest of it, it's a really lovely thing. But quite often, actually, I get parents telling me that their daughters love that record.
Oh, nice.
Which I think is a nice thing, you know, and or at least that was their gateway into reading about history or whatever.
This one I need you to explain.
Where are these from, by the way?
I made them.
Oh, you made them, right? Okay.
Of course I did.
I was like, is this a band who's doing this that I haven't heard about? Okay, right.
So
that's a relief.
The Way Out, the Way Out art project.
The Way Out. Oh, fucking hell.
How the fuck can people push back on that? Because again, this is like, you as you say, Tallest Poppy and Drawing Fire for like worlds of reasons. Sometimes with the Pedro situation, you know, it's a lesson learned, as there were with some of the when you got called out in The Guardian, for example. That was a learning moment.
Of course it was, and it's really important to say that, like, I'm just an idiot who's trying to negotiate the world same as everybody else.
I've got the luxury of getting to edit this, so like if I say anything, I'm forever self-policing.
Right, and like, you know,
but with the privilege of awareness of I need to future-proof.
Right.
So
yes.
This is another aspect.
I think, you know, of course I've said and done sort of, like, I've said ill-phrased things in public in my life. Jesus Christ, I mean, I do a lot of fucking interviews, and I've been, to some minor extent, a public figure for most of my adult life, and it's like, so, yeah, I mean, you know, particularly like when people, I mean, the Guardian thing, I'll take my oil to a degree, I said some dumb shit, but even when that article came out, that interview was like 7 years old. Do you know what I mean? And it was just kind of like,
people trolling basically as well.
Yeah, right. And it's like, but like I say, I will take my oil, and like, you know, and as you say, it was a learning moment. I learned more about how to communicate what I think, and indeed to take other people's feelings into consideration. And I think that's a good thing. It's a shame in some ways that it's a thing that I had to learn in this really public way, and like ultimately getting kind of monstered on social media or whatever is no fun. And like, sometimes people are like talking about, cancel culture doesn't exist, all that kind of thing. It's like, clearly you've never been on the receiving end of it, because if you had, you'd never say that. Like, it's a shitty thing.
I really want to highlight as well that, like, because just to say it, that like when these things happen, when just some of the more bullshit things as well, and it's like, you're a person,
right? And that's completely not part of people's kind of thought process.
And it genuinely, it can't not affect you.
Of course, and like, I mean, it's been disastrous for my mental health over the years. Like, and I had to learn on the fly how, because the other thing is, a lot of my career as a solo artist was sort of happening as social media was becoming a thing. All of us were trying to figure out how it worked, you know, and Twitter was deeply, deeply awful for a long time. Nowadays I think no one really cares, and that's better. But like, it was horrible for a time, and but yeah, so you know, like there's been some really rough moments in my life with it. Like, and I'm talking suicidal ideation, I'm talking wanting to quit music permanently, all this kind of stuff. So, like I say, I will take my oil to a degree. Do you know what I mean? And there's more than one way of having that conversation. Do you know what I mean? And there are ways of kind of being polite, not being constructive. Let's say that. Do you know what I mean? It's like trying to sort of help people, including me, be better at navigating the world and engaging with the world and communicating with the world. The way I did things was fucking annoying because like.
It was such a great project as well.
It is a great project, and I still work with them to this day. Okay. And like, there are a whole pile of people I know out there who, through the charities work, it's important to say I don't work for the charity. They're the people who do the work. My job is to sort of shout about it, basically fundraise and send attention and money in their direction, which I do. I mean, like I pay their rent on their headquarters. That's
nice.
You know, stuff like that. So like, but it's like. It's helping some of the most marginalised people in the world, all of whom are fantastic human beings who are incredibly talented and have been through some of the worst shit imaginable and live in a way that is, for anybody from the UK, is
unimaginable.
Yeah, unimaginable.
Just to piece out on the...
That's about to fall down.
That's going to fall down. Just to piece out on the negativity. Not going to go. I was curious on... I'm going to...
Just pull it down.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, mic's still attached. I was curious on the aspect of the latest album whereby this whole conversations with your 15-year-old self.
Yeah, sure.
With that awareness, did you ever feel that some of the attacks that you fielded were stinging a little harsher for the sake of that voice that maybe was giving it extra credence?
Yes, I think so. But I think then that also raises another interesting issue, which is probably the one of the shittiest days of my life. So we've mentioned my school. I hated it. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want anything to do with it, particularly from a kind of social political angle. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
absolute antithesis of what we were about.
Right. Do you know what I mean? And like, I sort of came into political consciousness in that place, and I loathed it, and I didn't want to do with it, and all that, and so there was one show at the Red Eye where me and Chris came in, and a bunch of people like cold shouldered us and told us to fuck off because they just found out where we went to school. And actually, you know who had our backs? Was Seamus from TVAC and Leo from 17 Stitches. Both sick. Like stood up for us, who are two solidly working class, punk as fuck, but also working class guys who come from nothing. And their whole thing was like, the point of this space is it's supposed to be, it's community of volition. Like, you chose to be here. Do you know what I mean? And by being here, it means you've subscribed to a certain set of values. And but it was heartbreaking for me because I hated where I was. I didn't want to be there, and I found this was the community that was so important to me. And then suddenly that community was like, "Hey, fuck off! You're not welcome." That sucked. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I was like 16, and it's like I'm old enough now to know that 16-year-olds are fucking kids. You know what I mean? Yeah. And of course, the people on the other end of this were also kids. And you know, I don't want to judge anybody by things that they said or did when they were children, but
speaking of when you were children,
oh no, what is Jesus H Christ? That's me, you, and Chris. Who are the other people in there?
That's me and Sarah.
Okay, and then is that Ben in the back?
That's Ben.
Oh, that's Ben.
That's
Ben. Fucking hell! Can I keep this?
Yeah, that's yours.
That makes my fucking day, man.
It's a sticker player. So you can peel them off and stick them on things. They used to be everywhere back in the day.
That is so cool.
I remember we stopped at a service and got
that
done.
Man.
No,
it's
no problem.
My day. But yeah, so I'm going to put that over there with my fact checking. You know, so like I was very alienated is the word, and conflicted and fucked up about who my parents were.
Well, it's like an outsider in an outsider scenario then, because if they're saying you don't belong here, it's like, well, what the fuck? Where am I?
Well, there's the song Somewhere in Between, a new record, which has a lot to do with that, and because to this day, moving forward with it a bit, like in some ways I'm proud of this, as in that basically with my solo career, I played with Mumford & Sons, Laura Marling, and the Libertines, and indeed with like Gallows and people like that when I was starting out, but I was never a paid up card carrying member of any particular scene with my solo career. And broadly speaking, I think that what I've managed to do is exist in a slightly scene-free way, if you know what I mean. You may agree or disagree with that, but
just quickly.
Which Frank are you? Is it Turner? Is it Connor? Which Frank are you? The lad from Gallows from Egypt. People got tattoos. Connor Turner. Which Frank are you?
Love it.
But like that confusion.
But at the same time, like, you know, there's definitely been days where like it's quite easy to feel like I don't really like have a crew. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And that's the hardest song I've ever written in terms of where I went with it lyrically, and it's like, you know, trying to find somewhere to belong and something to belong to. And it's like there is a huge part of me that on the one side I want to be like Jesus is the band that doesn't fit, right? You know what I mean? And I love that
forever
idea.
Just cool and fuck you.
Yeah, you know, but at the same time there are days when it's like, which revival wave is going to catch me? Probably none of them. Do you know what I mean? Because I've always just had one foot out the door.
You need to stop doing what you're doing for there to be a revival.
Well, that is the other thing. You know, fuck them, I don't need one. But it, you know, there's definitely there is a little kid inside me who still just wants to be part of something.
We've dragged this out a fair bit. We're going to piece it out with the final question.
Okay.
42. What do the next 10 years look like? Any big goals? Anything that's like sort of the ideas? Or just more of the same?
I was nearly talking about this at the start of this interview. I've done 10 records, and I feel that I have to justify making another record every time I do, because I don't want to just be churning it out. I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want to make a record because that's what I do. Yeah. I need to have something to say. You know, I need to have a reason to go on tour. Ultimately, my proudest achievement to date is that I'm still fucking doing this. Do you know what I mean? Like, fuck you all. My first tour was 26 years ago. Eat my balls. But, you know what I mean? But, like, I want to do this for life, but I also want to make sure that I'm not outstaying my welcome. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, ultimately, this is my job, and I don't really know how to do anything else. So, like, I have bills to pay.
Well, I mean, you can write a book. You can,
true.
You can produce a record. It turns out.
Yeah, it turns out. But do you see what I mean? Like, it's, you know.
But could you imagine, like, say, for example, their directorial aspirations? No.
Goodness, no. That's not a thing I know how to do. Producing is something that I've recently got into, and which I really love. And
so just being pulling the strings in the background.
Yeah, you know, I did 2 albums for the Maths.
Sorry, I was thinking film production.
No, film's not really my world.
No.
I did get asked if I would be in a film, like quite a big budget Hollywood thing at one point, and I said no, because it was just like, I don't know how to act. Like, I have no fucking idea how to act. They sent me the script, and it had a bit, the character they wanted me to play had to like cry for a bit, and I was like, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I've never been any good at acting or whatever. But you know, producing.
Are you allowed to give us a name?
It was the production team and the director and the writer who made the film Shutter Island.
Oh.
It was their next film.
Oh, okay.
To be part of, but I said no. You know, I mean, in some ways, let's see what comes up. I'm sort of pretty open to ideas, and maybe other side projects and stuff like that could be fun. But like, I want to keep touring. I mean, it's my favorite thing in the world, and it's the one thing in life that I think I'm reasonably good at.
One final question on that front. Do you feel that you will get to a point where you need to address that touring need in the same way that you've addressed other addictions?
No.
Okay.
For the simple reason that it's not. I mean, I suppose you
can rationalize it far easier.
Well, it doesn't. Okay, I had this really life-changing tour in 2017. We toured with Jason Isbell in the States, and Jason is dry because he used to be a catastrophe alcoholic.
Yeah.
And it was this real eye-opener of a way of touring that isn't just an endless stag do. Do you know what I mean? It was really kind of like adult. He had his family with him, and it was like, oh. And these days, I mean, I have a glass of wine after the show, and that's me, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Like, we're not doing Jaeger bombs or indeed drugs on tour anymore, which I did for a long time.
Or indeed shots.
And like, you know, I try and sort of, I guess the point is, like, I mean, I went through a pretty bad cocaine addiction point in my life, and like, that's an addiction. Is touring an addiction? I mean, maybe from some angles, but it doesn't actively kill me. Do you know what I mean? Like, in fact, I would argue it does the opposite. It enables me to live my life to the full. Yeah. You know, and therefore I don't feel the need to do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, I can keep doing this, and it's not gonna kill me. I mean, having said that, obviously you were saying about the percentages dropping off. I have to pace myself more these days. You know, I need more days off than I used to.
No, but also it's coming off the back of the pandemic as well.
Yeah, of course.
But
like, you know, we did ease the gas off a bit in terms of the amount of shows we do in a year, and it's partly, you know, people in my band have kids, and you know, I might have kids one day, and it's just the physicality of it. My voice can't handle doing. We did 26 shows in a row without a day off in 2007. I can't do that anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's just not an option. So, you know, there's definitely.
I think that was May, June.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, how the fuck did we do that? And so there's definitely a sense of like, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay.
Let's say, but I mean, Leonard Cohen was touring well into his 80s. That's cool as fuck.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
I reckon that's about as good a place as any to piece it out.
Hey, man, thank you. This has been so cool.